We are live. It's 7 p.m. in the UK, and I have the UK's top nutritionist with me, as seen on TV, the Keto Pro, Richard Smith. Hi, Richard.
Stephen, how are we doing, my man?
I'm doing really well, and it's nice to see you. It's always great to be in the presence of a celebrity, and
If only.
that's you, mate, the Keto Pro. We've got Tom J saying good evening already, and Sean, who I don't know if he's turned up, was one of those that took the advice last week to get in quick with a question. So I'm going to put Sean's question straight up, and we'll get in. Well, actually, before that, a little bit of housekeeping. Remember, we will try and answer every question. If you want to get it to the top of the pile, then you can do a super chat, which really helps both us guys out. If you don't use a super chat, don't worry. But, Rich and I try to give everyone a decent amount of time on each question. So if you are waiting 10 minutes, you don't need to retype the question. You can just bide your time, and we will try to do it. So let's read Sean's question. How can I lose my droopy belly? I don't normally exercise, lost 2 stone, but still pear-shaped. So firstly, Sean, well done on losing 2 stone. Is the droopy belly, are you alluding to loose muscle, or are you talking about loose skin, or are you talking about still got belly fat? So we'll assume, what should we assume, Richard? Belly fat that they're talking about, or should we assume all those 3 things? It could be loose skin he's talking about. It could be not very tight muscle.
Yeah, how can I lose my droopy belly? Well, let's cover all of them. I mean, there's currently no other questions in there. So, living a low-carb, ketogenic, carnivore-based lifestyle is going to allow you to burn that body fat. It does take time. There's no miracle cure. Consistency is key, and we can get into how to do that as we go through the live. Coming down to loose belly fat, we lose the body fat quicker than the skin tightens. And from memory, and I may be wrong with this, Steve, you may know a little bit more, but I'm sure it takes around 28 days, I think, for the skin to replenish on the body. So as we're losing this body fat, the skin is going to be saggy and in excess. And I had saggy belly skin. I had stretch marks. Women suffer with cellulite, so on and so forth. But these things, we're told that we cannot get rid of them. We're told that maybe we should have, a tummy tuck and all these sorts of things. I'm dead against doing these sorts of things. And the reason for this is the body has a limited amount of fat cells. It's not the amount of fat cells that we have that's the problem. It's the size of them. If our body has less fat cells, then we risk overspilling the fat cells as they fill with fat. So if we take away fat within the body, because we don't lose fat, we just shrink the cells. If we take away those fat cells and we are to come back and gain weight again, the fat cells can become full, exposed, and they'll overspill, and this can lead to detrimental downstream health issues. So I'm dead against taking away, liposuction, taking away excess fat. There are extreme conditions, and I'm not saying this is 100% for everybody, but I would persevere in regards to continuing with the lifestyle, keeping consistent. Fasting is an incredible tool because fasting allows the body to go into a state of autophagy, mitophagy, brown fat activation, lipolysis, and increase in insulin sensitivity. Living a ketogenic lifestyle without fasting can elicit this response, but fasting can still upregulate it also. By doing so and doing sensibly, and maybe we can get into sensible protocols in regards to fasting as we go through, but I'm just going to assume that most of the guys and girls listening, understand fasting to some degree. By doing it sensibly, we will use the old, sick, and dying cells, the amyloid plaques and proteins within the body, and the skin will tighten. It will tighten over time. If we are a little older, this is slower, but it still happens. And we must remember that age is just a number. Yes, cells divide as we age, the telomeres, which are the little laces on the end of the chromosomes, if you like, which are divided every time the cell divides. But what I find is living this lifestyle allows us to do things well beyond what we're told to do in regards to age. I'm doing things now that I was not capable of doing in my 20s. I'm not saying age doesn't catch you in the end, but I also believe that 100 isn't old. So if so, make of that what you will. But fasting is a fantastic tool. Consistency is key. Living a clean, healthy lifestyle, low carb, ketogenic, carnivore based lifestyle will allow you to do these things. Fasting is a fantastic protocol. Implementing all of these will allow you to achieve your goals generally. And there are other levers that we can pull, but I think that's probably more than enough to address that initial question, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the thing. That's a great question, and you can write longer questions if you want to. I mean, I would just say, and it's not going against what you said, Richard, but occasionally there are people out there that just resort to surgery to get rid of their excess skin. So one of the big influencers who I really respect for her honesty is Laura Spath, and she lost a ton of weight. She almost literally lost a ton of weight, and she just couldn't cope with the excess skin and had surgery, which is fine. I have no problem with that. That's not a sort of remark on anything other than her honesty. To be honest, it was great that she did that. So yeah, exercise will see. The thing is, let's just make it very layman's. Exercising your stomach will, yes, tone your muscle a bit, but it's not going to change anything, because if you've got a layer of fat on there, you can't spot reduce. You can't say, right, I've got belly fat, so therefore I'm going to do 100 push-ups every single day and I'm going to reduce the fat on there. It might improve the appearance slightly, but you will still have the same amount of fat. It's all about diet, and also a little bit about hydration, actually. So you've got to get your fluid balance right and your electrolyte balance right. So I think Rich did well there not to mention that. But let's get into a couple of other questions. Tom J has said, right, now then. Your past self asked me to remind your future you to talk about gut health and the microbiome today. So here you go. Right, Tom. Now, I was very let down by a lab who I've done one type of gut microbiome test, which is a hair analysis, but I've also done one where I've used my actual poop. But the lab lost the poop sample, which is really frustrating. So my planned talk has gone down the toilet, literally. So if you don't mind, we'll talk. Tom, you're a regular. We'll talk about it next week in a bit more detail, but just briefly, the biggest problem I have with alpha diversity, the posh name for these sort of tests, is that 50% of the bacteria you're going to get from that matter was going to go down the toilet, is not on any databases anywhere. We're still in the dark about it. You really are. And also, when we talk about what is a healthy gut microbiome, what is your frame of reference? Not talking to you, Tom, in particular. I'm talking about, the people out there. How do they know? Well, normally when you really get into the weeds, in the end, however big and fancy the words are and the books are and the research is, they say a healthy gut microbiome is the microbiome that a healthy person has. Seriously, they have that circular reasoning, a rationale to it that they don't know. That's the thing. So I would also say, having had the hair analysis back and getting into the weeds of that, because I know my body, I can look at the results and I can quiz them a little bit more about what's going on at the lab. There's still assumptions of it's very similar to bloods, which I have a lot of knowledge about. It's still based on assumptions that this is good because omega-3, I can give you that as an example. For instance, omega-3, a lot of the labs will look at the relation to your saturated fat as well that's come back from the analysis. Well, if you're eating this way, you will have slightly higher saturated fat, but it's going to throw out what they say about your omega-3. They don't actually often give you a raw value, which you can say, oh, right, it's 100 units. That's great. It will be in relation to other things in your body. So they might say your omega-3 to omega-6 is not as good as it wants to be. It's not 4-to-1, it's not 8-to-1, or whatever it is that they particularly like. But it isn't looking at those two metrics. It's also factoring in other fats, and saturated fat would be one of those things. So if that's okay, we'll talk about the gut microbiome next week. If that's okay. And Richard muted there. So unless you want to talk about the gut microbiome, Rich, a little bit.
Do you know, I won't go into too much with this, but it is a question that I've been asked. In fact, it was one that reared its head today. Where does your fiber come from? Living a ketogenic carnivore, or at least carnivore type lifestyle. I can go into this really quickly if you've got 2 minutes for me to hit it, but brilliant. So look, the biggest thing when it comes to fiber is that we're told it feeds the colonocytes in the gut, and it does so by breaking down into a short chain fatty acid called butyrate. That butyrate binds the colonocytes and it feeds the colonocytes in the gut. And we're told that we need it for that, amongst other reasons, which we can dispel all of these common misbeliefs. But animal proteins also contain short chain fatty acids in the form of isobutyrate, valerate, and propionate, and others, which have been shown to feed the colonocytes in the gut at a higher rate than the short chain fatty acid butyrate from vegetables, which means that we can think of animal proteins as containing animal fiber. So we're told that we need the fiber from plants, but the fact is that these other short chain fatty acids from animal proteins feed the alpha diversity within our gut at a higher rate than the fiber from plants. And the interesting thing when it comes down to butyrate from plants, that butyrate binds to the colonocytes, but then it's further broken down into beta hydroxybutyrate, the master ketone body, even in a non-ketogenic state. Now, being carnivore, we produce ketones. Our beta hydroxybutyrate is running through the veins, feeding the colonocyte in every gut, irrespective of consuming animal proteins. So there's two different avenues there in which we do not need plant fiber. There's nothing of any nutritional value coming from plants. And again, we can really go into town with this from vitamin A down to zinc. There are no vitamins or minerals in high quantities, at least in vegetables, that we cannot get from more bioavailable sources from animal proteins. The fact is we do not need to eat vegetables. They are full of phytoalexins, plant toxins, which damage the body through slow reaction and through a quick reaction. Most of the plants on the planet will kill us dead, and this is why we can't just go out eating any random plant from your local park. But it's but we're told that these vegetables contain these magical compounds like sulforaphane, which is detrimental to your health, by the way, despite its use in cancer. You don't take chemotherapy pill unless you've got cancer. So why are you eating broccoli? But there we are. I mean, we can really get into the weeds in this. And you can see you've probably, you've hit a little nerve with. It's a conversation that comes up constantly, but that's my two penneth.
Yay, two penneth. And there will be a few merchandise bits with my two penneth and the Converse benefit coming out soon. Right, now then. That's beautiful what you just said, Rich. It brings me on to the next question, and I can talk about plants and fruit and fiber. Ollie Humphreys, what was the video you mentioned with Lee about the engineered fruit and veg? Hope that's kind of clear. LOL, thanks. Yeah, well, it is clear. I'm going to do a screen share. I'm sure Richard won't mind if I do that. So let's just screen share. This is a video I did. I've done a link into the chat for you there, but the reason I'm putting that up on the screen is because it is about fruit and veg, but it's very referenced. Okay, so all the studies down here, so everything I say in there is a reference. Now this, like pears for instance, this is from the pear growers, this is from the NCBI treatments in storage, vitamin C decreases. This is all really interesting about how the stored fruit loses all its nutrients, antioxidant drop off, public access to this document as well, where basically the fruit is stored for so long, it ends up just being a bag of sugar, really. Oxalates, lectins, phytates. So all of the stuff that Rich is talking about there, let's remove that from the screen, is in that video. So I'm just going to stop that screen share. And everything we talk about, we can reference. We're not just making this stuff up. So anyway, right. No, I can't read this one. Tam, hi boys, hope you're both okay. Need one on one, or info, as I have my first surgery 15th May, so can't wait. I think you're talking about a one-on-one consultation. So depending on which channel you're on, in my description, there's always a link to booking. If you're looking for a 1 and 2, we do group coaching as well. So maybe Tam, I think you know Richard, drop Richard an email about that and we'll hook something up. So now we got Plum. Decades of reactive hypoglycemia, now ketogenic, but blood glucose still low, sometimes low 50s, even 45. Ketones, got an answer there already. Ketones average 2 to 4. Carnivore, plant-free, dairy-free, too mad. Should I worry? Right, Plum, I'm going to leave that up on there and ask you, how do you feel? Now, with 15 years of being a specialist practitioner in obesity and diabetes, numbers are not as important as how you feel. And Coach Becky, who works with Benazadi, is notoriously low in her blood glucose, and she's very public about it. And, you know, when I used to do the diabetes meeting at MeetRx with Sean Baker, we would look at Coach Becky's blood glucose, and theoretically, she shouldn't be doing anything. But there'd be videos of her chopping wood and taking big logs all around her, her yard and doing loads of stuff. So if you have allegedly hypoglycemic blood glucose, but you're operating all right, no, you shouldn't worry. And certainly, if you've got high levels of ketones, what do ketones do? They give you energy. So to me, I'm not overly worried. But if you said you've got lots of complications, dizziness, fainting, when you stand up, you get lightheaded, then we need to look at what's going on there. But I think you would write that in your question if that was a problem. So that's my answer. I don't know if Rich wants to put a two-penneth in.
You know, I completely agree. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was just Googling what is now classed as hypoglycemic range. And in the UK, it's 3.9 millimolars per litre. Mine is quite often 2.9, sometimes lower. So technically in a glycemic range. I'm very rarely lightheaded unless I've just run a half marathon or 10K in a quick time for me. And as you say, you're right. These ranges are given to the average person. The average person is not well. The average person is fueled by glucose. We are not. When we are fueled by ketones, we are giving the body another energy source. Therefore, our requirement for that range is considerably lower. And there was a study, wasn't it, with I can never remember the guy's name, but he fast the longest ever recorded fast, the Scotsman, 300 and something odd days. I think when they tested. And I'm sure it's this one. If not, I could be confusing two different studies. But at the end of the fast, they injected him with insulin to see what would happen because he had no glucose in the body. And basically, this could have killed him. We wouldn't be allowed to do it today. But he's perfectly fine. Yet, his blood glucose dropped, and he was still alive, operating and functioning perfectly well because his ketones were elevated. And this is what ketones do: the body needs glucose, but we make all the glucose that we need. We don't need any exogenous ketones. And this is why we still have blood glucose. I wouldn't be concerned, as Stephen says, as long as you are feeling happy in yourself, energetic, you're not dizzy, lightheaded, then it's no concern to me. Obviously, no, this isn't medical advice. Stephen and I can't give medical advice. But this is what I would always come back to, is how are you feeling? Because lots of my bloods basically say that I'm borderline going to die if you listen to the doctor. My cholesterol is double figures, yet I'm the fittest and healthiest that I've ever been. These ranges, as Stephen says, are for the average person. The average person is not well.
Yeah, now the weird thing is, I was reading this earlier. George Cahill from Harvard, it was some starvation studies, which as Richard pointed out, you can't do these studies anymore. And the subjects ended up with lower blood sugar levels than they started with, because they were running on ketones. What they were trying to do, actually, one of the things is they were trying to see what parts of the body actually do definitely need glucose. And the only thing they found was red blood cells. Despite the list being maybe 4 or 5 other things, That was the only thing. So anyway, 1960s, you can look it up, George Cahill. But anyway, well, one of the subjects' blood sugar dropped to 25 milligrams per deciliter, which is the lowest on record. The subject did fine throughout. If you took a man not in ketosis and not adapted and ran his blood sugar that low, he would be unconscious long before his blood sugar got to 25 milligrams per deciliter. So it is, if you're ketogenic, that's been studied. I was actually studying it because I wanted to get to what definitely needs glucose, and I wanted to find a definitive study. That is the best I can find, because obviously when you're that low in blood glucose, your body is running on ketones, which you alluded to straight in the question, which is really interesting. So there you go. So we've done that one. Somebody asked about the...
Can I just add really quickly just add to that? I mean, the studies in regards to what does actually require glucose in the body, and we've seen many amounts of times now that it's the red blood cells, the erythrocytes, but the glutaminergic neurons in the brain, they need rapid energy from glucose, and some of the nerve cells in the brain don't have mitochondria, and only cells with mitochondria can use ketones for energy. So I would still argue that the brain does need glucose. But to what capacity, I'm unsure. But I think it doesn't matter is the end result, because the body makes all the glucose that the brain needs anyway. So whatever requirement that the brain does actually require, if any, but I mean, I would argue that the glutaminergic neurons need this because, as I say, some of the cells within the nerve cells don't have mitochondria. We need mitochondria to use ketones. But just an interesting fact I thought I'd tag on to the end.
Yeah, and I think, yes, you're right. I mean, actually, that study does mention the brain, and it talks about possibly 70% of the brain could run on ketones. But I wanted the definitive answer of exactly how much, because, I like to know that sort of thing. If you're looking at millimoles per litre, 25 milligrams per deciliter is 1.39. So just throw that in there. All right. So, and that person was perfectly fine, but they had a lot of ketones. I really like this from Iris, actually. I just spotted that I do interval fasting. I eat once or twice a day. I just like that phrase. I've never seen it like that, which is good. Now then. Peter, I'm 59. I've noticed I've lost half my eyebrows on each side. I missed a chat on this somewhere else. Do you know anything about this? Thanks a million, guys. Yeah, absolutely. That was me on Team GB. We were talking about the lateral third of your eyebrows are often associated, if they thin out, is often associated, big word there, not causative, associated with low iodine. That's what it is. So if you look at someone like Dave Feldman, he's a really, really good example of someone who's lost that. Now, I actually, because I'm an old geezer, 60 in a month's time, I have eyebrows that decide to sort of woohoo, go off and do their own thing, and they look like Einstein's hair, which is the only thing I'm like Einstein with. So I trim them, and a couple of people have told me off, viewers, and said you shouldn't do that because it looks like you've got a problem with your lateral third of your eyebrow. So that's what we were talking about. I am having some tests done. I'm not doing the iodine clearance test, but I am having some other tests done. But anyway, so that's what we were talking about. But we'll move on, because I think that's not that interesting, is it? Really? Is it? Is that interesting, Rich? What do you think?
I find it all interesting. What do you know? The best thing about these lives are the variety of questions, because the worst thing for you and I think, is to address the same questions we go. I love questions like this. It's, they're fantastic. A segue from that, just to tap into that, the unflavored electrolyte that you guys have been asking arrives tomorrow, way later than expected. They contain iodine. So we have iodine in the electrolytes also, which is fantastic. And yeah, they should be hitting the deck tomorrow. And I have a special discount for any of the guys that have been looking for carnivore electrolytes. And that's going to be, in fact, let me get that up on my screen before I'm lying. It's YouTube Live, and that will give you 15% off any purchase of the website over our electrolytes, flavored or unflavored. And I will be putting that live now. So any of you who want the unflavored can pre-order them, and I'll drop a link below as well as we're chatting for anyone who's interested.
Okay. Yeah, Andrew here with an observation. Hi, Andrew. Thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate it. People are obsessed with having abs, but I've always felt best and performed better athletically when I don't have abs. They are only partially visible. I mean, obviously, that's what you're meaning, having visible abs. We've all got abs, and it's just how much fat's covering them. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I agree.
Nice question. Again, sorry, Rich. Is a cheeseburger okay on keto, or does the dairy do it in using sharp cheddar? Right. Well, firstly, if people are new, we're not talking about cheeseburger like you'd imagine with a bun, a bit of cheese, a burger, and a bun. We're talking about a burger. I'm hoping a beef patty and cheese on it, and no bun. Is it okay? Depends on you as an individual. If you feel like you're thriving with cheese in your diet, then if it's not broke, don't fix it. But if your body composition is not where you want it to be, and everything else is really great, you're eating lots of chicken, lots of bacon, you're eating lots of beef, lamb, goose, whatever you're eating, duck, eggs, obviously, both duck eggs and ducks. There's lots of things you can eat. And then you can add other things like, mussels and shrimp and prawns and all this sort of thing. And then dairy, you see, is a subset of the carnivore diet, and it can stall you somewhat. So anyway, Rich is busy typing his thing. So is it okay? Your body will tell you if it's okay. Right. Matthew. Hello, Matthew. And hope that was a good enough answer. Good evening, gents. As well as increasing the length of telomeres through eating red meat, which we've got a study on that proves that happens, and that's key to longevity, are there other ways to lengthen them? Right. So I think we got Richard back. Exercise allegedly does it. I would argue about that. I think when they talk about lengthening them, I think they mean reduce the rate in which they recede. That's personally what I don't think they get bigger, but only red meat has been studied and shown to actually increase the length. So, to answer your question, I don't think there's anything other than red meat, but if we're going to be in tune with the mainstream, exercise can probably reduce the rate in which they reduce. Smoking, alcohol, all that stuff, stress, that's it. maybe omega-3 and vitamin D status could have some impact. But anyway, Rich, do you want to chime in with that?
Yeah, I agree. Red meat is the only thing that I've seen that does lengthen the telomeres. Vegetables do not. All of these so-called magical compounds do nothing but damage the length of the telomeres, as you rightly say. I think there are things that you can do to prevent the rate in which they are reduced. But red meat, to my knowledge, is the only compound which has been referenced in 2 studies that does show that it can lengthen the telomere. Just to tell and explain the listeners what the telomeres are, they're like little caps on the end of our chromosomes, and they are every time the cell divides, the telomeres are reduced, and this is correlated to longevity, how long we live. The more we reduce the telomeres, the closer we are to death, I guess. And that is a very simplistic way to put it, but we want to prevent this rate of deterioration. And there are certain compounds which do this extensively. And as Stephen alluded to, smoking, alcohol, lots of stress, so on and so forth. So, the answer to that question is, for me, no, eat your red meat, stay fit and healthy, do not drink, do not smoke, and try not to eat too many plants.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ollie has got one more question. So doing his Columbo there. Just one more thing. 107 days in. When is a good start? When is a good stage to do bloods? I've heard 6 months. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question, Ollie. It's always good to do bloods before you start, so you've got a benchmark. And then if you've done bloods, then maybe 3 months in is a good time. So that you'd be sort of around that, won't you, in about 13 days. The best time is what you can afford budget-wise. So if you did after 3 months and then you did another 3 months, you get some good data. But you could be just throwing your money away, because if you feel good, your body composition is going the right way, you have less aches and pains, your skin is better, your sleep is better, your energy is better, your digestion is better, your toilet habits are better, you might not need bloods. Yes, bloods can work in a good way to give you a heads up on things, but they're not the be all and end all. And don't forget, before we did blood testing, we've had 350 years of evolution where we've got by without it. If you want to know all about bloods, if you go into the description, I have got a book about bloods. I've got a book called The Guide to Blood Tests in the context of keto, low carb, and carnivore diets, because there's a lot to learn about it, and it's less than $10 if you look at that. And currently, I've got a producer now doing an audio book on Audible. So if you want to wait for that, should be out 7th of May. Right. Okay. Andrew has come back, and he's put another question in, and I agree with him here. I think just looking at your poo is the best way to judge also how you feel. Yeah, that's it. Actually, I'm a big fan of looking at your urine, making sure it's not clear, because if it's clear, you're drinking too much water, and if it's dark, then you need to drink slightly more water. And this is where rich electrolytes can come in, because if you're eating this way and you have depleted your electrolytes by losing lots of water weight, then you could sort of stock up on sort of some electrolytes with Richard's products. But there you go. Right. Here we go. Matthew, see, the same people, once they have one question, they all dive in with another one. My friend says he struggles to deal with stress without taking ashwagandha. Are there likely to be negative effects long term? So, yes. Rich looks like he's jumping at the bit. So let's have Rich answer that one first.
So, look, I think, Steve, you can probably get into more detail in regards to this, but we've covered it a couple of times previously. Plants are fantastic at being used for medication. There are times in which we need medication, and if I hadn't taken medication at several points within my life, I would be dead. So I'm not against medication. I'm not against plants in that respect and these compounds. But is it something we should be taking daily? I don't believe so. So I think maybe in the short term, these things can confer a benefit. That's t-shirt number 2. Available soon. I think they can confer a benefit. But the reality is that, you know, we were looking at NAC and these other compounds that are hitting the market, you know, currently, many of which activate or overactivate the NRF2 pathway, which is an oxidative stress pathway. And I don't believe that we want to be overacting this pathway extensively. This is why, you know, things like the Skool product that you were using does not activate this pathway. And I think that's incredibly important, because many of the compounds that show that they confer this benefit do so, and they overactivate this pathway, and there's an elevation in glutathione, and it seems to confer a benefit, but it isn't, because this pathway is an oxidative stress pathway. It's the result of consuming a compound which is in effect a pro-oxidant. So yes, taking compounds like this can help in the short term. Should we be consuming them long term? I'm not a big fan. I think short term possibly, but you know, what is causing this stress in the first place? And when we look at stress, and there's lots of contributing factors. I'm not saying it's completely to do with diet, but I am a big believer in that it is predominantly diet based. At least the biggest control that we have on it comes from diet. And when we look at the neurotransmitters, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, melatonin, all of these things, they allow us to feel happy or sad and stressed and so on and so forth. We need specific proteins, amino acids, tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine to create the neurotransmitters. But we also need other ingredients to bake our cake, our keto cake, if you like. You know, you can't make a cake without eggs, and we can't produce our neurotransmitters effectively without cofactors, things like zinc, iron, magnesium, vitamin B3, vitamin B6, vitamin B12, so on and so forth. Many of the compounds within plants will block the absorption of these cofactors. Therefore, you know, I'm basically, in short, what I mean by this is eating too many compounds from plants block the body's ability to create these neurotransmitters, which lead to us feeling depressed and anxious and stressed just by removing them. and gravitating more towards an animal-based lifestyle, allow these neurotransmitters to be produced, and allow us to be less stressed and feel less anxious and so on and so forth. I used to suffer, I've quite literally walked the walk with this. I used to suffer with severe anxiety and depression to the point I could not leave my home. My life was spent living in boxes, and I've told this story, a number of times, and I will say it again because I think it's highly impactful. But my life was spent living in boxes. I lived in my house a box. The only time that I would leave my box is to jump into my metal box, to drive to another big box, my place of work, in which I would walk into that big box and reside in my small box within that big box, my office. And then I would do this in reverse to go home. My life was spent living in boxes because I suffered severely with depression, anxiety, and stress. Now, I do talks to hundreds of people. We did a talk for the War on Health conference 2 weeks ago, Steve. We've got another one lined up. We do these lives. We do public speaking events. I could not do these things prior to this. And it's through changing my diet, removing these compounds, that has allowed me to overcome these things. So in short, just to summarize, I think these compounds can help in the short term, but I'm not convinced we should rely on them long term. And I think we should maybe look into what is causing the issue, look at the root cause and address that, and try to come away from these compounds for the long term.
That's really good. That's good. Right. Now then, I got told off because I missed a question. So I'll do that first. Which is weird because someone asked about ashwagandha and you call yourself ashwagandha. You missed my question about bone broth. Does it contain a lot of protein? Yeah, normally about 10 grams. Can I drink it between meals instead of coffee, or will it massively increase my protein intake? No, it's a great alternative to coffee. Sorry, Richard. Go for it, mate.
Sorry, man. Go on. You carry on. I'll chirp in when you've...
No, I've said my bit. I think that's it. That's all I need to say on that.
Could you pop it back up for me? Just to make sure I'm addressing. Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
So does it? So yes, the protein is in there. What I would add to this is that the protein or the amino acid profile is very different to that is found in animal proteins. Bone broth is high in electrolytes and collagen, which is fantastic. We can get these through our diet, through eating the connective tissue of the bones and the knuckles on the chicken bones, and so on and so forth. But bone broth is fantastic, really good source of electrolytes. Can I drink it in between meals? And again, as Steve said, yes. But what I would try to do is allow 2 hours after or in between meals, because the amino acids can compete for absorption. This is why we try not to take collagen around meal times. And this is the type of amino acids and glycine, for example, that are found within these compounds. They can compete for absorption if we co-consume too close. So try to leave around a 2-hour gap before or after a meal. But I'm a big lover of bone broth. We stock bone broth by the British Bone Broth Company. Fantastic product. I quite often have it in the evening in hot water. You could use it as gravy over your food. And again, I know that I'm just saying you shouldn't consume it with your meal because it competes. But if you want to add something to your meal for flavor, a gravy, then it's a fantastic product to do so. But I'm a big lover of bone broth. It's incredibly time extensive to make, isn't it? But I encourage everybody to do so. Chicken tends to take around 24 hours, and beef bones is closer to 48. But a big lover of bone broth.
Yeah, and there's a discount code on my website, so you can go to my website, and the website is the ukcarnivore.com, and then it's /discount #codes, and there's one there for Rachel's company, the British Bone Broth Company. Just going back to ashwagandha, what are the long-term effects? You said I might have a little bit to add. Yes, well, the long-term effects, well, actually, no. Let's just reframe the answer. What does ashwagandha do? Because Rich was great about what is causing the stress. So that is definitely the first question. Don't do the symptoms, get to the cause. So first you find out, but let's say they haven't done that. They can't do that. They don't know what's causing them the stress. They can't tell their boss what they really think of them, or whatever is causing the stress. So that's the first thing. But secondly, so what's the mechanism of action? Well, it reduces inflammation and it reduces blood glucose, right? So What else does that? This way of eating. So I think that is the thing I would do. I would try to get them to do the right thing and eat a species appropriate diet. Long term problems are things like diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, um, just basically all the headaches, drowsiness, all the stuff. And of course, you become dependent on it. So there you go. It's not addictive, but you do become dependent, as your friend is finding out. Right. So let's have a look at the next thing. Gaza, this is nice. There is loads of good feedback in the chat. I just wanted to pick one up. Not a question, but I'd like to say thanks for all you do and the great info. My sleep apneas have been reduced from 8 to 12 an hour with CPAP before carnivore to a new low of 0.8 an hour. So that's really good. Right. Susan, who's a big fan of what we do and is a member of our Skool community, which is free to join. I'm trying to eat carnivore, but can't give up my keto sweets yet. That makes me a treativore. How many grams of protein and how many grams of fat should I be aiming for under these circumstances? Firstly, I want to say something. Now, I've not been a fan of having things like meal plans, but people keep asking this question. All right. So I'm just going to show you something that I do. You don't have to buy this if you don't want to, but I do actually do meal plans for people that ask this very question. So if you've got a weight, an ideal weight, so for instance, I do it in bands. So if someone wants to be 70 kilograms, there's a different one. If someone wants to be 75, and I get people to tell me what their favorite foods are, and then we do a plan, which is really simple. This person wanted to do 1 meal a day. So you get all your macronutrients. You get, if you're still into calories, you get calories and all that sort of stuff. But it's designed to give you what you want. Okay. Also does an automatic shopping list, so you've got nothing. You've got no excuse, basically, no excuse, and it tells you how to cook it. Tells you how to make it keto if you really need to do it, what the ingredients are, and every single thing there. So you get a PDF, but you also get an interactive link. So you can even move things around. Like instead of having the macronutrients, you can have it as a ratio between fats and proteins. You can do anything you like. You can change your servings, everything. And if you're interested in that, just email me. There should be also a link if you want to fill out the details. But to answer your question, how many grams of fat should I be aiming for? How many grams of protein? Normally, I say start with 1 gram of protein, 1 gram of fat per 1 pound of lean body mass. So if you wanted to weigh 140 pounds, you would have 140 grams of protein, 140 grams of fat as your starting point. That's it. It's really that simple. And then you constantly look at your body composition, make sure you're eating enough, you feel nice and full, and you're rocking and rolling. It really, really is that simple. So that's why I'm not a big fan of pushing meal plans, because I do think it is that simple. But too many people have asked this question, and too many people have said, look, I eat lamb, beef, chicken, and that's all I eat, and eggs. Can you do a plan around that? So I now do that as a personalized thing. It's a paid for service. I do have some free ones if you want just sort of rough guides, but it's much better to do it personalized, and it will see you through the first 28 days. And once you've done 4 weeks of it, you should know what you're doing. Simple as that. Hope that's helpful. And Sue, you're a member of Skool community. So if you want to ask me about that tomorrow, when we do our live at 5 p.m., Rich and I, then feel free to ask another question. And for those people that have watched us on YouTube but haven't seen us anywhere else, if you want to join a free community, which is full of fun and nice people, then there's a link to the Skool community, low carb Skool, we call it. It's very inclusive. You can talk low carb, you can talk keto, you can talk about carnivore. There's lots and lots of free resources on there, and just tons of things you can do. And you can learn about thyroid, you can learn about protein, fats. You can do a free course. It's a great community. Right, here we go. Once a week man who I met at the War on Health. Lovely fella. I recently cooked a pork joint. Should I eat the rendered fat? I do with beef and lamb.
I do. I know that many seem to have trouble digesting. But look, I do. If you have issues with it, don't eat it. But it tends to be more from people coming into the lifestyle. And when we speak about this, we quite often mention the bile production as not being enough in order to allow us to process that fat. But the opposite is also true. When we consume more fat in some groups of people, bile production is exceeded, or it becomes what it should be, but the body is unable to process the excess bile. So it should be recycled and reabsorbed in the small intestine. And quite often, when you're new to this way of eating and you've increased the amount of fat that you're consuming, it doesn't get reabsorbed, and it ends up in the lower gut, in which it causes toilet troubles. So the opposite to this is also true. So it could be one of both things, but many people new to the lifestyle can't cope with it. A lot of people, even experienced carnivores and ketonians, do suffer with rendered fat. It works really well for me. But I mean, if it causes an issue, take it out. If it doesn't, then it's still a good source of fat, I believe. And I know that Steve's got a lot of information in regards to this, but it does work really well for me.
Brilliant. You caught me out there. I thought you were going to do a longer question, but there you go. So let's get a longer answer. Right. So
you've told me off too many times, my long answers. So I'm trying to keep.
Right. Andy 828. Now, this is one of the few things I think Rich and I slightly disagree on. Are you in favor of artificial sweeteners? I recently read that they can trick the brain into producing insulin thoughts. I will put my 2 pence in first. And then Rich, who has a lot more experience and understanding of electrolytes, because that's his business, can give his thoughts on what I think. Right. So artificial sweeteners, if they are a bridge to you eating this way, then they're a good thing. Because if you say, well, I can't give up absolutely everything, I need a little bit of sweetness in my life, then they're good. Some people leave keto because of keto treats, because their foot is still in the sweet camp and they feel that they need to be an abstainer from sweetness. So I'm just trying to be balanced here. So when people come from keto and they say, oh, it's a keto treat, so doing me in, should I use artificial sweetener? This isn't about mechanisms. This is just about people. I think we should try to get away from the sweet taste, because that does seem to work for some people. So that's it. Now, from the diabetic side and from the phlebotomy side, the cephalic response is a real thing. Definitely. There are some people that know they're going to have something sweet, and it will have an impact on their body. They will have a physiological response, and they will actually, the body will gear up for incoming sweetness. So sweet taste on the tongue, and definitely in the brain, you get, this is going to be sweet. So you get a little bit of a response. You do get a cephalic response. Right. So that's my thoughts. But Rich obviously has gone into this much, much more than me, because he produces electrolytes. He decides what sweetness to use. He did earlier on say we're going to do an electrolyte without a sweetener. So, you know, I think we are more on the same page than he believes. But anyway, Rich, fire away.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. I think this is all about levels. As a friend of mine, Mikey Davis, always says to me, level 5. This is where you are, Rich. It's level 5, you know. And when we give advice, you know, sometimes people say to us that, oh, well, you told so-and-so last week that this, you know, they shouldn't do this. We're all at different points in our journey. Level 5 is the creme de la creme. This is pure carnivore, potentially lion, just eating grass-fed beef and lamb with salt and water. Job done. Very few of us on the planet are going to live that lifestyle, especially for long periods of time. If you could do that, fantastic. And I truly believe that this is the healthiest way to live. But coming up to level 5, we have different segues. If consuming an artificial sweetener is going to allow you, as Stephen says, a segue into reducing carbohydrate, then that is a segue worth taking. There are some sweeteners which are incredibly damaging, and there are some which do cause way less damage. And by less damage, I mean cause that cephalic response. Things like xylitol, maltitol, sucralose, all of these are not so good. They can elicit that response. And quite often, many of the polyols can still be absorbed as carbohydrate by as much as 60%. So the carb killer bars, for example, you see on the market that claim 1 to 2 grams of net carbs. The reality is your body's probably absorbing closer to 16. So they're not really low carb. They're allowed to say that because the polyols that they contain, which are xylitol, maltitol, so on and so forth, are polyols. And we're told that the body doesn't absorb any of these, but your body does. There's only one polyol, in fact, technically 2 polyols, but one which is known, and that is erythritol. Erythritol is the only polyol that goes through the body without causing any response, or at least absorbing as carbohydrate. Stevia is another one, which isn't a polyol. Again, both natural. They both come from plants. That does elicit very little response, if none at all, in most people. And the percentage of people that it will elicit that cephalic response is incredibly low, but still, it can do this. So those are the 2 best on the market. There are another 2. There's allulose and glycerol. Now, glycerol is a sweet fat, which is technically a polyol, but it's also a fat. So I've put that into a different category. This is what is contained in the bars, the keto bars that I make. So we don't use stevia or erythritol. We've removed them. We use this glycerol, which is a sweet fat. So those are my 4 top ones. If you can be without them, even better. But if you are going to consume some form of sweetener, then it should be these. But again, it's all about levels. It's all about where you are on your journey. And I am a big fan. So I was talking to Professor Noakes not so long ago in regards to some of the ambassadors that work for the Noakes Foundation, and one of them was slating like the keto bars and keto treats. And he said to me, that people don't understand that this is a segue for many people. That keto bar may be the difference between somebody maintaining the lifestyle or eating a Mars bar or whatever your chocolate or sweet treat of choice is. For that person, that could be the tool that enables them to continue and maintain the journey. And I think we can become incredibly dogmatic in regards to the lifestyle that we live, because we live such a strict lifestyle. I don't find it strict. I love the food we eat, but strict compared to the normal sense. And we quite often think, and we quite often see people on social media channels saying to people, well, this isn't keto or this isn't carnivore. And look, you don't have to be put into boxes. I am an incredibly strict carnivore. I still consume my electrolytes that contain stevia, yet I regard myself as one of the strictest carnivores on the planet. Now that the unflavored are out, I'll probably gravitate more towards those. All about these little steps. Level 5. To get that in. But do I ever fall off plan? Christmas time, my little girl wanted a Christmas dinner. She wanted me to eat a Christmas dinner. And dare I say it, I ate some vegetables. Shoot me. And it didn't make me feel very good. In fact, I felt awful after consuming these vegetables. But that doesn't mean I'm not carnivore. Just because I ate some form of vegetable on one day. You can live in this lifestyle. You can be incredibly strict. If you want to have something that is off plan, that doesn't mean that you are not a carnivore or you are not ketogenic, because this is all about the rule and not the exception. If we can live this lifestyle for the majority of the time, 30 days out of 31, then that doesn't make you a non-carnivore or a non-ketogenic person. You need to use the tools that allow you to maintain the journey, because consistency is key. If you need some of these artificial sweeteners in your life, fantastic. That's fine. Just make educated decisions in regards to which ones you use. And again, I believe erythritol, stevia, glycerol, and allulose to be the best. I don't use allulose, but the other 3 that I do, it's all about choices, and again, consistency is key. So that's my opinion. If you can be without them and live a super strict lion diet with grass-fed beef and lamb, salt and water, fantastic. But very few of us on the planet can do this long term in regards to that. And don't beat yourself up if you go to a wedding or something else and you need to and I dare say eat some cake. My little girl made me a birthday cake, and a long time ago. I'm not going to not eat that birthday cake because I live a strict lifestyle. So don't beat yourself up. Just brush it off, get back on the wagon, and keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and I'll give you a little tip. Yeah, that was your short answer. Yeah, and just a little tip for people that have problems with trolls on the internet, and they say that's not an animal, that's not carnivore, that's not an animal. It's as simple as that. You can say, "Excuse me, if you drink water, is that an animal? If you're having salt, is that an animal?" So you can always throw it back at these people because it isn't about that. It's about lifestyle. Anyway, right, here's a question. Landers, I will answer this question. While Steve is here, can I ask, what is the quote "read on Macduff" refer to? Well, actually, it's a misquote from Shakespeare. Shakespeare actually says, lay on Macduff, as Macduff is attacking Macbeth, but it's been misquoted as lead on Macduff, which just means, right, okay, let's go on, let's do this, or read on Macduff. It's just basically saying we're at this point and we're going forward. For those that don't know, many years ago, I've also got an honours degree in English literature, and I did a few shows. I did some Shakespeare. I was Petruchio in Taming of the Shrew, and also did improvised Shakespeare at the Edinburgh Festival, which we did a Shakespearean play based on audience suggestions. So big fan of it. And if you're interested, speaking in iambic pentameter is why people like Patrick Stewart in Star Trek or Michael Caine do so well, because they speak in a Shakespearean way. So if you want to do a Michael Caine impression, learn how to do iambic pentameter, and then you can speak like Michael Caine and you can do a really good impression of him. Right. Anyway, right. So here we go. The next one. I don't know how to pronounce that. I would say Isa or Asa. Anyway, I can't believe these testimonies stating they lost 50 pounds in 50 days only by changing the diet. Well, that's a shame, because only yesterday I had a coaching client that signed up on the 1st of April. And what was it yesterday? 13th of April. And she's lost 10 pounds. So it does happen. It does really happen. And I've got a lot of success stories. But anyway, you haven't lost anything after 2 weeks. That also happens. I feel good, though. That also happens. So a lot of people don't lose the weight straight away. It's surprising you haven't lost water weight. Calorie restriction. No. Fasting. That's probably better if you want to do some intermittent fasting. But I just think eat the right way. And we've only got 3 minutes, Rich.
Yeah,
I'll
really quickly. Yeah, really quickly. So again, it's not about calories, and we can get into this on the other channel, which we're going live at 8 p.m. That rhymes with apple crumble. I'm sure Steve will pop a link in. Look, these things do happen. I lost 28 pounds in the first 28 days of beginning my journey. A total of 107 pounds in 12 months. It is out there. We're all in different positions, different places. The body is damaged and quite often needs to heal and repair. This can quite often lead to people gaining weight in the early stages. What I would suggest is join our Skool network, because Stephen and I are going live tomorrow. We can get into this in way more detail tomorrow, and maybe mention some levers that we can pull. But calorie restriction is not the way. Fasting is not the way for now, and I'll explain that in more detail tomorrow also. But a great question. I wish we had more time to go in this, but I know Steve has starred one more to get into. So let's get onto that one, and we can address this tomorrow. Sorry.
Yeah, Andrew has put in, we shouldn't really call it apple crumble, maybe carnivore crumble, aardvark crumble. Yeah,
or just crumble.
Yeah, just crumble. Yeah, maybe there's no meaty crumble, is there? So anyway, that's the end of that. We are on another platform for about half an hour afterwards. If you're interested in the merchandise, there's a link on my channel if you want this. There's plenty of other things there. We will see you on the other platform. And if you haven't had a question answered, like I say, could use the super chat, turn up earlier next week. Sorry, Rich, go on.
Yeah, Michael's got a question in there. Look, if Michael wants to join the next platform, we can address that in there. Yeah, let's get as many people over there as we can, shall we?
Yeah, yes. So there's a link in the description. People don't understand sometimes what I mean by that. This video, underneath it, there's a description about this video, and there is a link into it. I've also just put it in the chat. Apple crumble is the rhyming word for the platform we are going to be on literally in about 60 seconds. So everybody on YouTube, because we can say that name, and also on Facebook and on Twitter, X, thanks for watching. We're going now, and only the people that are watching on the video, I think, will be able to find us on the other platform. Anyway, thanks a lot. See you at
Thank you all.
on the crumble thing.